Welcome everyone to today's webinar on riteSCAN webinar on pallet staging. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sue Pogachnik and I'm the marketing manager here at RiteSoft, and I'll be helping moderate today's session. Ryan Winnicky, one of our RiteSoft implementation and support specialists, will be the presenter today. First, Ryan will outline how you can now stage materials for production faster with pallet staging. Next, he'll discuss the new custom field options for PO receipts to allow you to capture quality information and more. After that, Ryan will give you a sneak peek of the new Android UI and what's on the riteSCAN roadmap. At the end of the webinar, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A window at any time during the webinar. If you have any technical issues, you can let us know via the chat window as well. So we have a full agenda today, so let's get started. Ryan?
Thank you very much, Sue, and welcome everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and see what's the latest with RiteSoft and riteSCAN. So to get started here, we're just going to kick off things talking about our latest release or latest enhancement, pallet staging. In the past, many of our customers have often asked the question of how, where, when do I stage materials in different processes in my warehouse, like movements, whip staging, or staging materials for order picking. Some of the issues that customers face to drive these questions were materials weren't where they were supposed to be when they needed them, or the wrong materials were staged for the job, or they have no way to perform bulk movements of multiple stock codes for operators that are doing this on a daily basis. Previously, this was a challenging question for us to provide an effective answer for. However, since the introduction of pallet staging, we now have an answer to provide users a workflow and a process to build pallets, move materials throughout inventory, and make sure the correct materials are where they need to be when they need them for WIP as well. So if you're not familiar with pallet tracking was a functionality that we added above and beyond with riteSCAN about 2 years ago. And one of the latest enhancements to our pallet tracking function is the module release of pallet staging. What pallet staging allows you to do, there's 3 different methodologies that we're going to take a look at: the inventory, WIP, and order processing. So inventory is going to be staging a pallet to view or adjust any materials on an existing pallet, or maybe I just want to build a pallet to move to a new location, whether it's warehouse or new bin location. The other one we're going to take a look at is WIP, and what that allows you to do is create or use an existing pallet to stage materials for production based on specific job materials lists or your bill of materials. And this allows you to build a kit, basically, for a job and then issue all of those materials at one time. The final methodology we're going to take a look at is for order processing. So wanting to create a pallet or stage a pallet for a specific sales order, or maybe multiple pallets for a sales order. So once the pallet is made, you can then move that pallet into some sort of staging area, or maybe you actually want to pick the items on the pallet against the order. So let's take a look at inventory to start. So building a pallet from inventory allows the user to use an existing pallet, or they can use a new pallet by simply generating a new pallet ID. Once they do that, they're going to see all of the items that are consisted on that pallet so far. Maybe it's a brand new pallet that has nothing on it, but at that point, what they can do is simply scan a stock code that they want to add to the pallet. Then they're going to be prompted to enter their quantity. The other key benefit of this process is all of the data integrity that is kept intact with SYSPRO and the riteSCAN system is carried into these processes for pallet tracking and pallet staging. So for example, if an item is a lot traceable item, riteSCAN is going to know that information, and it's going to require the operator to also enter the lot number that's being added to this pallet as well. So it really allows you the flexibility to track your inventory in the same way you do it today, down to the bins, the lots, and the serials, and being able to provide those bulk transactions. The other key benefit is once you're done building out that pallet, we've really created a workflow that allows your operators to then do something. So maybe at that point they're done with the pallet and they just want to save it and leave it where it's at. That's perfectly fine. But maybe what your operator is actually looking to do is build a pallet to move it to a new location. That could be a bin transfer or a warehouse transfer that they're wanting to perform. And what we've done is we've linked those processes together. So when they're done with the pallet, they can save it, or they can actually select bin transfer or warehouse transfer, allowing the operator to then move everything that they just did in that little process, creating the pallet, through a bulk bin transfer of moving that pallet into a new bin location or a new warehouse transaction as well. It can be really beneficial to helping streamline those processes for operators that are doing those transitions on a daily basis from one location to another in bulk movements. Another key area that we want to take a look at with pallet staging is the ability to process and build a pallet to stage for WIP. This seems to be an issue that a lot of people have different processes around, and this helps kind of fill in some of those gaps and provide another stage that you can help fulfill some of those gaps for where you were trying to close in on that process. Maybe your operator today has a paper pick list of the bill of materials that they're using to stage. Well, now you have the ability to automate that process as well through pallet staging. So just as before, the operators can scan an existing pallet or create a new pallet that they want to build for a specific job. Then they're going to simply scan the job that they want to build the pallet for. And what riteSCAN is going to do is bring in that pick list of items that they're going to actually pick for this specific job. So the operator can then simply pick against that list by simply scanning the stock code, the quantity that they want to pick against, versus what's the outstanding quantity that I need for this job as well. So once the operator is done picking all of the items that they want to stage for a specific job, just as before, now they can select the workflow of what do I want to do with this pallet. And that could be just saving the pallet and leaving it in its existing location because it's ready now to be consumed by WIP. Or what they can actually do is do a transfer. They could transfer that pallet if you have a staging warehouse or maybe you have a staging bin location that you guys use in your existing processes. They can do that warehouse transfer, moving all the items that they just picked for that specific job into that new location that they want to put it to within a simple scan. The other real benefit is the ability to actually issue the materials to the job. So for example, once they're done building a pallet, let's say that they fulfilled all the quantities that I want to issue to this job, they can go job issue. And what that's going to do is automate the process, bringing them right into the job issue screen to issue all of the materials that they just picked on that pallet against the job. The real benefit to this is all of the logic that you have set up in your riteSCAN system or in your SYSPRO system is still intact. So for example, if an operator has a pallet that contains items that aren't for that job, riteSCAN is going to recognize that information and it's going to stop the operator to prevent any sort of errors, and that validation is always taking place from a stock codes and quantities perspective to ensure that all the data integrity is still there when you're carrying it over and using it in a pallet sort of function as well. This can be a real benefit to helping link that gap between when do I stage materials and how do I provide an operator a simple workflow to be able to effectively do their job from a staging perspective as well. The final thing that we're going to take a look at from an pallet staging functions is the order process function. So if you're not familiar, we've actually released over the last 6 months a new order picking module that's added a lot of functionality to riteSCAN and how you can process orders. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it or haven't seen it because you haven't updated in a while, definitely reach out to our team or ask us questions about it, because it can really help improve your process and provide you some more workflows as well for being able to automate that order processing. So the other benefit is linking that to pallet staging. So just as we were talking about in WIP, this process is very similar, except for now we're doing it from a sales order picking perspective. So what riteSCAN allows the operator to do, again, is scan the pallet that they want to use or generate a new pallet that they wanted to use. And then once they do that, they can scan the order that they want to begin picking for. So once they scan the order, it's going to bring up their list of items and quantities to pick for this order based on the sales order pick. Once they do that, what the operator can do is simply scan the stock code that they want to begin picking, fulfill the quantity. If they want to view the contents of what's on this pallet so far, they can also select the pallet contents button to see what do I specifically have on this pallet so far against what is on this specific sales order that I'm supposed to be picking. And all of this is updating in real time as the operator is going through this pick process. Just as before, we're going to notice that we also now have a pick order button once the operator has completed it. So once the operator has picked it, or maybe they only picked a partial because we want to use multiple pallets for a single order, which is completely fine as well. You can actually build out multiple pallets for a single order. But at this point, you may move it into a staging area for shipment, or maybe you move it into a staging warehouse for shipment. Or maybe you go put it back into inventory in a location because you're not going to ship that for another week. And that's all perfectly fine. We've created that process that allows you to go through this pick process without affecting inventory. It's just a preparation and a staging step within the riteSCAN product. However, maybe I do want to actually pick that order at this time, and I want to validate the items on the pallet against the order so that way I can process and pick so far what is on this pallet. So I can actually select the pick order button. What that's going to do is that's actually going to pick what I just had picked and staged on that pallet against the order, bringing you right into the workflows that you have set up within your system for the order picking processes as well. So it really adds a lot of flexibility into linking these gaps within your operations for operators that may have been doing this paper today. They may have had a manual process. Maybe they were doing it off of a pick slip, or maybe they were doing it off a riteSCAN, but you were trying to figure out how to get this in-between stage figured out. And what riteSCAN pallet staging can help you do is fill the gap with that in-between stage of allowing a workflow for operators to perform these steps that they're doing on a daily basis without affecting the actual inventory. So that's one of the latest releases that we've had. In addition to the pallet staging module, another new enhancement we've made to riteSCAN is the ability to capture custom form fields within PO receipts. So if you're not familiar with custom form fields, or if you're currently using custom form fields, what this allows you to do is link any existing custom form fields that you have in SYSPRO set up against the PO lines. And what this also allows you to do is now capture that data within riteSCAN, and it really provides you flexibility from a configuration standpoint. Maybe your company was always looking, how can we fulfill capturing this data, but we were never able to do it before. Well, now with the riteSCAN system and being able to capture those custom forms, it allows you a lot of configurability for what you want to capture and how you want to capture that as well. So you can set this all up from the admin function of riteSCAN if you're familiar. Going into the PO receipt module, you now have the capabilities you'll see on the bottom left there to select those purchase order line custom form settings and set those up, whether they're required fields or maybe they're not required fields because you only need to capture them for a specific supplier or a specific order. And you can set all of that up and configure it how it best suits your needs. Some of the examples of how customers are using these custom form fields, maybe you need to capture a certain quality information from a certain supplier when you receive an order. Maybe you need to capture certain product information as that receipt happens. All of that can be set up. So you'll see on my example on the right here, one of our customers, what they want to capture is the vehicle number that it arrived on, the temperature of the truck, was there any damage, yes or no, and was the shelf life requirements met, yes or no as well. So, and this can be completely configured based on what your requirements. This is just one example of how a customer is using those custom form fields within riteSCAN and linking that into their SYSPRO system, providing them that one step further of visibility of specific data that's most relevant to theirs. So there's a lot of ways that a customer can use these fields. And the exciting thing that riteSCAN can now do is we're able to set up the ability to capture that data and build it right into your existing PO receiving processes that you may be using with riteSCAN. So currently this functionality is only available within the PO receipts module. However, We are planning to roll these custom form fields out into other modules over the next several months, including job receipts and sales order picking as well. So there's going to be even more flexibility as we go on with these enhancements to provide you those functionalities within the riteSCAN product. With that being said, now that we kind of talked about some of these latest enhancements, I'd also like to demo this to you. So I'm just going to switch over to my riteSCAN screen here. And we're actually going to take a look at this live in the riteSCAN application of what does this look like from a pallet staging and custom form fields perspective. So now that we're taking a look at the riteSCAN screen, we're going to go ahead and log into riteSCAN. And just so you guys know, I am using it on our Windows client today, so I'm just using it on a tablet. But this is all functionality available whether you're using it on a client, on a handheld device, or on anything else that you're using, whether it's tablets or PCs. So we're going to actually start with taking a look at the custom form fields options. So when we take a look at the custom form fields options, we're going to go into the order picking module first. So we're going to go into purchase order receipt. Now this is available in both purchase order receipt and purchase order receipt all if you're using both of those modules or either one of the other. So I'm going to simply scan my PO that I'm wanting to capture. We can scan my line that I want to bring in, that I want to receive into inventory, select my quantity. Notice it brought in my default bin automatically for me as well. And now I'm going to post this transaction. Now, if I want to fill out those custom form fields, you'll notice in my options menu, I have custom form fields available. And if I don't require those custom form fields and I just want it as an optional field, they can go into there and select that manually on their own process. However, if you want to build up more of a consistent process and this is a required field and you set it up as a required field, as soon as I post this transaction, being it's a required field, riteSCAN's going to bring me into the custom form fields menu automatically. So I can simply scan in my vehicle number that I need to put in for this specific order. So I can scan that into the system or manually enter my vehicle number if I'd like to. You can also select the temperature. So for example, I have a range of data that it's capturing. So my temperature has to be within a range of -100 to 100. That way, if the operator tries to enter something other than that, it's going to throw me an error message to say something was making a mistake here. They can also select from the drop-down whether this is a yes or no. Was there any damage? No, there was not any damage. So I can save this. As soon as I save this, it's going to allow me to then perform the PO receipt transaction. And all of that data that I just captured is going to be stored against the PO line in those custom form fields that I have set up within SYSPRO as well. All right, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is actually receiving the order to a pallet. So I'm going to go into our PO receipt all module here, and we're going to go ahead and pull up that same order. But now what I actually want to show you guys is receiving it to an existing pallet. So if you're not familiar with pallet tracking, I'm going to select a pallet and I'm going to generate a new ID. I want a new pallet here. So we're going to generate that new ID, select OK. And now we're going to begin receiving to that pallet as well. So we're going to receive my A101 and a quantity of 5. Oops, I got to put in your bin location as well. And then we're also going to receive the first line here, A100, for the remaining quantity of 1 at this time as well. And we can post that transaction. Now, once we post that transaction, it's going to tell me that this pallet is a new pallet, so it's going to create that. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, we do. And now I've actually created that pallet within my inventory that can be used downstream in the next processes. So if we go ahead and take a look now, when I pull up this pallet, I can do that within the pallet staging module. So let's go into pallet staging. The first thing we're going to take a look at is pallet staging for inventory. So within inventory, I could generate a new pallet that I want to create, or I can use that existing pallet that I just received into inventory. So I'm going to scan that. And notice it's going to bring in my quantities that I have on this pallet. So In this case, I have one A100 and 5 A101s existing on this pallet in location warehouse E, bin location E as well. So once I actually receive that onto the pallet, what I can do is simply add a new stock code. And when I add a new stock code, it's going to ask me for the quantity to add. If it was lot traceable, it would also require me to enter a lot number. And we're going to increase this because the pallet does contain it already. And now I'm going to have two A100s on this pallet. So once I'm done here, I can select done. And this is where it gives me the options of what do I want to do with the pallet. Do I want to save this pallet, or do I want to perform a warehouse transfer with this pallet? So if I wanted to perform a warehouse transfer, you're going to see here now that it's using my pallet 420. If I select here, I can see what's on the pallet so far. But it also brings in by default my location that I'm moving it from. And then I can put my location that I want to move it to. So if I want to move it to warehouse FG, bin FG, I can then post this transaction. And it's going to perform that warehouse transfer for all of the items and quantities contained within that specific pallet. So now it brings me back into my pallet staging module, and I could go on and create the next pallet as well. So we're going to close out of that. And now we're actually going to take a look at it from a WIP perspective. So when we go into WIP here, I'm going to generate a new pallet that I want to create for a specific job. And then I'm going to put in my warehouse that I want to create the pallet for, or from, I should say. And then I can simply scan my job as well that I want to create the pallet. So my job here, and notice it's going to bring in my list of items to pick. So now this is my bill of materials that I'm supposed to be picking for this job. So I can see my outstanding quantities that I should be picking for the job. And let's go ahead and we're going to actually begin adding those for this pallet and stage this pallet for WIP. So it's going to ask me for my quantity to enter. Let's say I want to enter 5 here. We're going to go on and pick the next line, and we're going to enter my quantity of 5. Oops, I actually want to enter one more for that. So my outstanding quantity is 1. And notice it's updating all of this information for me in real time. So I don't want to pick B112 for this job. I just want to issue the other materials. So what I can do is simply scan my next one. And I'm going to go ahead and pick all of the items for this pallet. And let's scan 5. And notice now my outstanding quantities are reduced. If I look at the pallet contents, I can see specifically what I just picked for this pallet. If I need to edit any of these contents, I could also do that right from this screen. We're going to go ahead and close that. And now that we're done with that, what we can do is select done. Now, here's where you again have the 3 options. Do I want to do a bin transfer, a warehouse transfer, or a job issue? Now, if you're not a multi-bin company, don't worry. The bin transfer is only going to be available if you're a multi-bin company and set up. riteSCAN's communicating that information back and forth based on your warehouse that is selected and that information each time as well. So we're going to select that we don't want to move it. We just want to issue these materials to the job. So I can select job issue, and notice it's going to bring me right into the job issue screen from riteSCAN. And it's using pallet, so it's using my pallet P421 here. So if I select the contents just as before, you can see it's each of the material allocations. Now the benefit is all of the logic that I have set up within my job issuing module is still intact. So it's going to require me that that pallet matches the contents of what my job is expecting. If I have logic not to allow operators to overissue to a job, it's not going to let me overissue if I actually picked 10 and the job was only expecting 5 at that time. All that validation is still taking place at this time as well. So once I actually go ahead and post this transaction, it's going to give me a message to say there's a stock take, which is fine. And it's going to issue all of those materials to that job at that time. So it's one simple workflow guiding the operator through the process of picking each of the items for the job and then allowing them to also issue it to the job right at that time. All right, the final thing we're going to take a look at is the order picking process. So within the order picking process here, this is going to be very similar to what we just went through with the whip picking, except for now we're doing it from a sales order perspective. So we're going to generate a new pallet, or we can use an existing pallet. Let's go ahead and actually, oh, we moved that actually. We're going to generate a new pallet here. And then we're going to put in our order number that we want to pick this for. It's going to bring up each of the line items for this specific order here. And then I can also pick the warehouse that I want to put this from. Being it's a multi-bin warehouse, it's going to ask for my bin location. And then we can go ahead and begin picking the actual items. So I can see each of my line items to pick for this sales order and the outstanding quantities. So we're going to go ahead and begin picking off of my list here. So quantity of 5 that I'm picking for this. A100, we can pick that line as well. And my quantity of 2, go ahead and pick that. And then we can pick the final A102 as well, and a quantity of 2. Go ahead and pick that. Now, once I've picked all of these contents for the sales order, at that time, what I can simply do is select done, or I can view my pallet to ensure that I picked everything correctly. Select done, and at this time, if I want to pick the order, I could select pick the order. And what this is going to do is pick all of the contents for that specific order at that time. So it's going to go through that process, picking each of the contents for that order, moving them into the next status within your process. So for example, if I set up my sales order picking statuses, once I'm complete, I can actually update those statuses along the way, picking from pallets. Now, if I wanted to actually just save the pallet and move on and actually pick that pallet at a later date within the order picking module, you could also do that by going into order picking here and selecting that you want to use pallets. And when I scan my order now within the pallet tracking module, you can see that this would allow me to now simply scan my pallet to pick those items. Now, I already picked those items against the order, and that's why you're not seeing them here. So if I show all my lines, you'll see that I have already picked those because I selected the pick pallets within my last module when I was staging the pallet as well. Definitely, I recommend, if you guys haven't had a chance to check out the order picking module, feel free to reach out to our team and ask some questions and see if it might be a better fit for your operations as well. All right, so that really covers most of riteSCAN. What we're going to do is we're going to actually go back into the PowerPoint presentation here. Give me just a second as I switch back to our other screen. All right. Sue, are you able to see the new demo screen again?
Yes, the demo screen is visible.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's talk about what's going on in the market. You might have heard us talking about this in some of our previous webinars or just out in the marketplace in general, but the market is definitely changing for software and hardware devices among many different industries, and manufacturing is really no exception to that. I don't know if you've heard yet, but the sunset of Windows Mobile pending within the next 2 years has really started to stir up the marketplace from a hardware perspective. Android devices are becoming more cost effective and more popular right now with some of the big name companies like Zebra and Honeywell. So with that, it makes us all start to think Android. We're starting to see the transition. More than half of the devices that are shipping from Honeywell and Zebra are either having dual OSs with both Android and Windows capabilities, or they're Android only options. So that has also got us thinking here at RiteSoft as well. And you might have heard some of the stir. We're building out our Android platform at this time, creating the Android capabilities for the new hardware devices. So it's a really exciting time, bringing some of those new Android features and functionalities into our products and providing that to our customer base as well. So with that being said, we want to take the time today to give you guys a sneak peek at what's to come with the new Android devices. So here at RiteSoft, we wanted to share some of these screens with you as to what are our plans with Android? What is it going to look like? Just within the next few weeks, we're actually planning to start releasing this to some of our internal partners for testing and starting to gain some of that as well. So it's really exciting. It's gearing up and it's coming hopefully here this early summer. So as the first step you're going to notice is we're updating the UI on the Android capabilities because it is a different platform. It is new. So some of that is going to change and you're going to start to see some of those changes. What that's going to result in though is we're really working to keep consistency with our core competency of smart, simple, and seamless. We will always will stick to those smart, simple, and seamless functionalities and features within our riteSCAN product. So within the login screen, you're going to see that this is very similar, very same functionality of how you're logging into the system. If you're using that credential manager to pre-fill defaults, don't worry, all those functionalities are carried over. That's not an issue with moving to that Android platform. So the next thing you want to take a look at is what is it going to look like inside? So we're transitioning to a more simple navigation that fits the Android platform, using a lot of the same icons and modules that are all the same that's getting carried over into Android as well. So you'll notice the navigation, just because it is Android, is moving into that left panel pane. But all of those modules that your operators are used to, those icons that they're used to, we're still keeping all of that consistency within our product as we move it into that new Android platform, but providing you some better navigation workflows that is more fitting to the new platform as well. Some of the other things that we're developing out on the Android platform, you're going to start to see some changes in the organization of some of the screens. So the benefit is that all of the existing workflows that riteSCAN has and all of your operators are used to are staying consistent for how they're interacting with the system. The order of scanning and those fields are just being reorganized to provide a better workflow for the operators on the Android platform, because there are some better capabilities with the hardware and what it can provide to you with screen scrolling capabilities. However, all those things that your operators are using on a daily basis from a buttons and functions features are still there right where they need them. Being able to do those bin queries or lot queries. The other things that you'll notice are at the top there. You're going to start to see your things that they were interacting with through an options menu are all available with a single tap. So if you're using smart scan capabilities, they can simply tap on the screen to begin scanning with smart scan as well, providing all those things that they're using daily at a very accessible, quick area on the handheld devices. The other thing that's kind of nice, which is one of the more larger changes to the workflow within riteSCAN, is the fields are able to dynamically adjust. And what that means is for the data that is required, that's all we're going to show on the screen for the operators. So for example, if I scan a stock code that is lot traceable, the lot field is going to be available to scan into. However, if I'm a company that doesn't use lot traceability within my operations, we're now able to dynamically change that. So if I know it's not a lot traceable item, we don't need to show that field anymore, which really just takes up less valuable on-screen space. We all know those screens on the handheld devices are fairly small, and that screen real estate is very important. So being able to dynamically adjust that. So if I'm not a multi-bin company, or I'm not a lot traceable company, or I don't use serials, I don't need that information unless it applies to me as well. So that really is a nice value add to some of our customers as well from a workflow perspective. You'll also notice, as I mentioned earlier, those commonly used buttons like Smart Scan and Queries are available right at the top of the screen for your operators to select the history. If there's any special options as well that allow your operators to make those adjustments, it's all available with a very user-friendly interface for touchscreen capabilities, along with those new Android devices that provide you a lot more flexibility of features and functions from a hardware perspective. It's really a nice breath to see what there is to offer from a hardware perspective with some of these changes in the industry. So it's a really exciting time. We're excited that Android is coming. We're hoping to get this into our partners and customers' hands very quickly. And it's exciting to gain that feedback from our customers that are using our products on a daily basis out on their warehouse every day, in and out. So we also want to talk about what's next on the roadmap. So we always talk about when a customer or a prospect is purchasing a warehouse automation system, you want to be investing into the future when you're looking and evaluating products. And we hope that you're doing just that with riteSCAN. You are. You don't have to worry that you're going to be cornered into a solution. We're constantly adding enhancements to our products, listening to our customers to see how we can improve our products for the customer base as a whole. So just taking a look at the last 6 months to a year, some of the major enhancements that we've made to riteSCAN, which some of you may be using, some of you may have heard of, or maybe you haven't even heard of some of these enhancements, but we've added the pallet tracking functionality, which is a big function. We've added pallet staging. We've added the new order picking module, which is exciting for building out new workflows. We've added the custom form field capabilities. The other thing that kind of goes overlooked by a lot of customers is we also have the ability for plugins. So we've developed a number of custom plugins for customers to meet their specific workflows and specific processes within their operations that can fulfill a need and a gap within their operations as well. So just as I mentioned, you also want to know what's next on the roadmap for riteSCAN. So just as I was talking about earlier, we're developing out several major enhancements to riteSCAN with the Android device compatibility. We're also bringing new language translations with riteSCAN for both Spanish and simplified Chinese. As I mentioned earlier with the custom forms, we're also planning to roll that out into new modules as well with job receipts and sales order picking. So there's a lot of exciting things to take a look at with riteSCAN. One of the other things that we're always doing is if you have suggestions or enhancements that you're looking for or gaps within your process that you're thinking, well, I think riteSCAN, if with something like this, we could really fulfill this gap. We're always listening to our customers for enhancements to how we can improve our products, make them better, make them more valuable to you as a customer and your operators that are using them on a daily basis as well. So with that being said, I appreciate you all joining, and what we're going to do now is actually open it up for questions.
All right, Ryan, it looks like we have a couple of questions here. The first question that I have is related to the pallet data. Where is the pallet data stored in the SYSPRO database?
So SYSPRO actually doesn't have any functionality in relation to pallet tracking. The pallet tracking module was actually a functionality riteSCAN was added above and beyond SYSPRO. So we actually store that pallet information in a SQLite table within our system. We are looking at ways currently to see how we can better integrate that into a custom pane or workflows or views in SYSPRO. But as of now, SYSPRO doesn't have that functionality, so it's just held within riteSCAN.
Okay. This next question also relates to the pallets. Can you move an item that is part of a pallet to another location, leaving the rest of the pallet behind?
Yes, definitely. So I didn't talk too much about it today, but when you're using the pallet tracking functionality, there's two different interaction methods that you can use within pallets. You can use single pallet mode, which is a mode of I'm just wanting to use this pallet, and let's say I want to move the whole pallet to a new location. The other model is what we call to and from mode. What that allows you to do is actually move contents from one pallet to another and moving it that way. So you're actually moving the specific contents or partials of a pallet into different areas as well. And that to from mode really allows you the flexibility from movements to receipts to issuing materials. There's a number of different ways that you can issue those partials as well.
Okay, this is the second part of the question. What if you had the same item on a pallet and not on a pallet in a warehouse that is not bin sensitive? How would you move those items from the pallet?
All right, let me just think about that one once more here. So Sorry, I'm just going to read it in a little more depth here. So if you had the same item on a pallet, none on a pallet. So what you would do at that point, from a pallet tracking perspective, it's always going to be validating the data of the existing pallet and the location that it's going to. So for example, if I'm reading this correctly, if I'm moving a pallet from a multi-bin warehouse to a non-multi-bin warehouse, once I perform that pallet movement, riteSCAN's validating the information of where it's going and who it's coming from to ensure that all of the required information is there. Feel free, if I didn't answer this one correctly, reach out to me separately. We can talk about it in more depth as well. But it really allows you that flexibility to, whether you're doing to from mode where you're doing partial contents, or if you're doing the whole pallet, it's validating the information that's required for each specific transaction as well.
Okay, this next question I have relates to Android. Will riteSCAN still work, the Android version of riteSCAN still work with our current hardware?
So it depends on your hardware that you have. So there is hardware that, so for example, I'll just take the MC9000 series devices. If you purchase devices that have Android capabilities, you can actually send those devices in to move them over from a Windows to Android platform. So that's one way you can use the new Android application. The other thing, we are still, it's not a hard cutoff. So for example, you can use some devices on the Android platform, and you can still have some devices on your Windows mobile platform as well. Once it's released and you have those capabilities, you can select, just as you do today, what version of client that you're wanting to install specifically on each device.
Okay, let's see. This next question relates to the custom forms. Are custom form fields available at the PO level and individual PO lines?
So currently the custom form fields are only held at the PO line level. So with each PO line transaction, that's where the custom form fields are actually held versus they do have custom forms at the PO header level as well, but we don't have the capabilities at this time to capture that data. It's just at the PO line level.
All right. Well, Ryan, that looks like that's the end of our questions.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And like I mentioned, as you start to see some of these enhancements, and if you have other questions that come up along the way, please feel free to reach out to our support team or reach out to one of our team members here to get some more information and make sure you can get as much as you want out of the product from a value perspective and using it to the fullest. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great weekend.